Tonight on NewsWatch, unrest in Egypt. Why the third anniversary of the uprising there is being marked with violence.
Plus, another round of freezing temperatures set to hit parts of the country. We'll show you where we'll get the coldest.
And how one group is working to bring hope to thousands of kids growing up without parents. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Violence is exploding in Egypt. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Lori Johnson. Egypt's wave of chaos comes ahead of this weekend's third anniversary of the nation's Arab Spring Revolution. And as Dale Hurd reports in tonight's top story, more violence is likely.
Anti-Muslim Brotherhood protesters gathered outside Cairo's main police headquarters after a suicide bomb ripped through the building earlier in the day. The blast was one in a series of attacks on police in the Egyptian capital, killing at least 6 people and wounding dozens, and at a time of mounting confrontation between Islamists and the military-backed government. This angry protester said all the Egyptians are sad because so far, unfortunately, the Muslim Brotherhood and former President Morsi and his accomplices are still sitting in prison and have not been executed. Please have mercy on the Egyptian people. These people have to be executed. The attacks will push tensions even further, a day before rival rallies planned by both supporters of the government and their Muslim Brotherhood opponents on the third anniversary of Egypt's 2011 uprising that toppled President Hosni Mubarak. Egypt's Interior Minister vowed, "We're going to secure Tahrir Square and all of Cairo's squares." There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but the bombings reinforced the government's view that the Muslim Brotherhood has been behind a wave of terrorism that has escalated since the military's ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi last July. 3 years since the uprising in the name of democracy, Egypt remains locked in a fight between the new government and the Brotherhood. In a statement, the Brotherhood condemned today's attacks and suggested the government did it as a pretext to crack down on them even harder. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And senior international correspondent Gary Lane joins us now with more. Now, Gary, in the last 3 years, the Brotherhood has gone from ruling Egypt to being rounded up and arrested. How much influence do they still hold among the people there?
That's amazing, isn't it?
It
In
really
3 years'
is.
time to think they went from nothing up on top and now a terrorist organization that is banned. They are not popular at all with the people. There are pockets of their supporters throughout the country that still support them and are doing things for them. But for the most part, the masses do not support them. We saw that recently, Mark, when 98% of the people voted in favor of the Constitution, and that was a clear rejection of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, Gary, just last week, the country voted on a constitutional referendum to move away from Islamic law. How will that help Egypt?
Well, it's going to help Egypt because it provides for more secularism and more freedom, or it should. In practice, we'll have to wait and see, but that's what the Constitution guarantees. So we'll see if that happens. But more freedom. Think of Israel. They're an open, democratic society in the Middle East, the most prosperous economically, and they have the most freedom there. If Egypt can be like that, they'll advance, the people will thrive, they'll prosper, and that's what everyone wants in Egypt, of course.
Well, I can't believe it, but it's already been 3 years since the uprising in Egypt, yet we're still seeing violence. What's it going to take to make it all stop?
Well, we predicted that. Remember, after the election, we said we haven't heard the end of the Muslim Brotherhood and their supporters. This is going to continue. They're going to continue to hit police stations, military bases, government infrastructure, and now I predict they'll probably go after churches again. We'll see that happen because they're not going to give up quietly. They've had a taste of power. They want it to continue.
What's next for Egypt?
Well, what's next? Within 3 months, they'll have another election, this one likely for president, followed 3 months after that for members of parliament. So if that happens and we get more secularists, fewer Islamists in parliament, a good presidential leader, we'll see Egypt move forward. But they've got to have results for the people. Economic prosperity, that's what the people are looking for.
Okay, Gary Lane, thank you. Appreciate it. And for more of Gary's insights, make sure you check out his blog. It's called The Global Lane, and you can find it at our website. Of course, that's cbnnews.com. Lori.
Any hope of progress and a plan to end the Syrian civil war is quickly fading. The country's government is giving a United Nations mediator an ultimatum. Serious talks start by Saturday or they'll walk away. Regime and opposition leaders are in Geneva, where face-to-face talks were supposed to begin today, but the opposition says it's not yet ready for those talks. Both sides are blaming each other for the lack of progress during the peace conference.
The United States is urging Olympic athletes to use caution when it comes to wearing Team USA clothes at the upcoming Sochi Games. According to the Wall Street Journal, the State Department told competitors that doing so could pose a safety risk in some areas. This warning comes as terrorism concerns in Russia continue to grow. A new video posted by the Islamic Jihad Union is gaining traction today, and the Al-Qaeda allied group threatens to attack the Games. Still, Russian President Vladimir Putin is insisting the Games will be safe.
Cold conditions are being seen across the country, and the low temperatures are not going up anytime soon. The winter weather is even threatening to put a damper on Super Bowl Sunday. Ephraim Graham reports.
This deep freeze is affecting 195 million Americans. At least 35 states from the Midwest to the Gulf are dealing with temperatures below freezing. Whiteout conditions in northwestern Indiana caused a pileup of more than 40 vehicles on Interstate 94, leaving 3 people dead and more than 20 injured. Crews are preparing for ice as far south as Texas.
Nothing's enough here, I'm sorry. I need layers on my face, layers on my hands.
In Chicago, people are seeing wind chills that feel like 20 below zero.
I'm looking forward to this summer. I'm not going to complain about how hot it is.
In Minnesota, those wind chills are dropping to 45 below. And in nearby Wisconsin, a propane shortage has families having to bundle up, even indoors.
Normally they're barefoot, so yeah, they've got socks on, we've got a hat on the baby.
Another industry bracing for the impact of the cold conditions, football.
We don't have a crystal ball on weather, but we're confident that we're going to be able to have our events.
For the first time ever, the NFL is suggesting the date of the Super Bowl could be moved. If a snowstorm hits the Garden State before next Sunday, the game will be played anytime between next Friday and Monday. Even if the snow holds off, the cold temperatures will not. So with 80,000 fans descending upon New Jersey, NFL officials will give out free hats, earmuffs, gloves, scarves, and hand warmers. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
The Republican Party has picked a woman to deliver the GOP response to President Obama's State of the Union address Tuesday. Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers is the highest-ranking Republican female in the nation's capital. The Washington State Congresswoman balances being a mom of 3 and her work in D.C., something many Republicans hope can connect her with more women voters. In the 2012 election, President Obama carried 55% of the female vote. Another demographic the Republican Party is trying to reach: Hispanics.
In California, Republican Andy Vidak went from an obscure cherry farmer to state senator almost overnight. And he was elected in a heavily Hispanic district against an Hispanic opponent.
As David Brody reports, his story may carry some lessons for the national Republican Party.
It looks like a typical swearing-in ceremony.
I, Andy Vidak, do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear.
But California State Senator Andy Vidak will tell you that the ride to get here was anything but typical.
What a long, strange trip it's been.
Vidak may look like a state senator when he takes the floor, but at heart, he's still a cherry farmer from the Central California Valley. He brings his lunch to work. He wears his cowboy hat during off hours and drives his faithful pickup truck, which has about 300,000 miles on it. Oh, and please don't call him Senator.
I'm just Andy.
Andy enjoyed life as a farmer and rancher, but as time went on, he watched environmental policies devastate California's economy. For example, farmers can only receive a small portion of water in order to protect fish.
We've got some radical environmentalism that has pushed it a little bit too far, well, actually a long way too far.
So the question is, how did Andy Vidak do it? How did an obscure cherry farmer south of Fresno, California, end up here at the state capitol in Sacramento? He did it with the help from Hispanics in his district. But what really caught the nation's attention is that he won against an Hispanic woman in a district that's 60% Hispanic and heavily favors Democrats.
I don't see colors. I mean, it was just about going and talking about common sense, values, common sense, because there is no party lines with common sense.
Nationally, the Republican Party is still trying to gain more of the Hispanic vote. As the Latino population increases its share of the electorate, their future votes are crucial to the GOP. So what can they learn from Whiteout's victory? Well, it helped that he speaks fluent Spanish, but also his working class roots, pro-family values, and community involvement really cemented the bond.
I cooked menudo for 9 hours in 98-degree heat. But I went to that not because they were Hispanic, but because there was 10,000 people there. And, you know, we just have to go out and talk to folks. You know, I don't ride a white horse. I'm not a silver bullet.
That underscores a larger point: authenticity. He didn't treat Hispanics as a political talking point, something that couldn't be said about his opponent. Opponent Leticia Perez received heavy criticism after attempting to attract churchgoers by using the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe in a campaign flyer. The lesson? Overtly political moves will not work with Latinos. And so there you have it, a lesson for the GOP from Andy Whiteout: compassion, authenticity, and time spent with Hispanics, plus a pro-family message. Whiteout also knows his victory included one more vital element: a faith in Jesus Christ.
I don't know how you could be a farmer and not have a lot of faith in God and know that he's in charge.
David Brody, CBN News, in Sacramento, California.
Opposing sides in the South Sudan conflict have agreed to a ceasefire. Government troops and forces loyal to the former vice president signed an agreement to lay down their weapons. They'll continue seeking a permanent peace accord. Tina Ramirez is a religious freedom advocate working in South Sudan. She thinks the former vice president may realize attempting a coup was a bad idea.
I think in the end, Riek will, get mud on his face and realize that he was wrong, and that the government of South Sudan is a legitimate government. It's not perfect, but it's legitimate government and it has the right to protect itself and its national unity.
Fighting between government troops and those loyal to the former vice president started last month. More than 1,000 people have died in the violence. 200,000 have become homeless.
Coming up, how one new pro-life film is getting its message across in a subtle way.
A new pro-life film is hitting theaters today. Vanessa Hudgens stars as a desperate pregnant teen in the movie Gimme Shelter.
And as Paul Strand reports, it's a film that gets across its message by showing, not preaching.
She said, "You carrying a baby, and I got to hear about it from a stranger."
The word abortion's never used, but for much of Gimme Shelter, that's what's on the line. Whether ghetto-raised, physically and sexually abused Apple will fight the odds and her own parents to keep the baby growing within her.
It's clear that you are not ready to assume the responsibility of motherhood.
Vanessa Hudgens is Miles from High School Musical, playing the bruised and beaten down Apple, terrified of her own mother, a frightening, desperate drug addict played by Rosario Dawson, and horribly let down by the rich father she's just found, played by Brendan Fraser.
That letter was the only thing I ever got from you, Dad.
Apple ends up homeless, half-frozen, friendless, until nearly deadly negative circumstances lead her to a most positive place, a warm home for unwed teen moms. This is all based on true stories the director found living at one of Kathy DiFiore's 5 shelters for women in need. Gimme Shelter takes us into the world of hope Kathy and thousands of supporters have given many hopeless, homeless women. It's not preachy, it just takes you up close to one beautiful but battered girl as you watch her transformed by friendship, a future, and the power of the little life she brings into the world. Gimme Shelter's released nationwide Friday, January 24th. Paul Strand, CBN News.
Up next, we travel to Thailand, where one group is working to unite otherwise orphaned children with family members.
An Ohio pastor is facing charges of human trafficking in the Philippines. The charges stem from Tom Randall's connection with an orphanage he founded. The Christian Post reports that 31 orphans, including 7 under the age of 18, say they've been routinely raped at the group home since 2005, and that Randall knew but failed to intervene. Pastor Joe Coffey works with Randall at Christ Community Chapel in Hudson, Ohio. He says Randall has done nothing wrong. More than 24,000 supporters are backing Randall on his Facebook page. Senator Rob Portman's office tells CBN News that the senator is working with the Filipino ambassador in Washington to investigate the situation.
At least 2 million children live in orphanages worldwide. In countries like Cambodia and Thailand, many of them have a parent or extended family that could care for them. As Heather Sells explains in tonight's Focus Report, all they need is a little bit of help.
More than 500 orphanages dot the northern Thailand countryside in the Chiang Mai province. That's a huge number for this region of 1.5 million people. And child advocates say it's a tragedy. Thousands of kids growing up without a parent, separated from their culture. Many orphanages are loving places, like Agape Home, which serves kids who have or may have HIV or AIDS. But even founder Avis Whiteout is quick to admit the situation is far from ideal.
This is a great place. You can see it, right? It's a home, but it's not a home. It's a family, but it's not a family. And if I had a choice today, I would not bring in anybody.
Tim Daniel manages Orphans Promise in Asia and says it's heartbreaking to see kids who have family living in institutions.
In orphanages in Thailand especially, you'll find many children who do have one or both parents.
Families in communities like this often find orphanages to be a big temptation, especially if they're raising a sister's child or a daughter's child. That's because the orphanage will care for a child at no cost, and life here is often very hard.
If an orphanage offers to provide free care, free shelter, free food, free clothing, free education, that's going to really help to alleviate the financial pressures on the family.
Government officials like Kun Rasa Khan say orphanages should be a last resort for Thai families. And she's especially concerned that many operations tolerate abuse, especially those not registered with the government.
So the places that don't register, you don't know what's going on there.
No.
In recent years, UNICEF and USAID have documented what happens to kids who grow up in institutions. They found delays in mental and physical development, children more at risk for health problems and abuse, and who struggle as adults to re-enter society. Bottom line, kids suffer when they don't have an adult who loves and cares for them permanently.
The caregivers there are sometimes there for short periods of time. They come and they go. They're there because they're being paid to be there. They may love the children, but they're paid to be there.
Such concerns have led Daniel and some others in the international community to begin advocating for what's called family-based or community-based care. In Thailand, it looks like this. 10-year-old Fa lives with her grandma and grandpa. She could have easily ended up in an orphanage because her father is in prison and her mother left the family. As her grandparents financially struggled, they discovered the Orphans Promise program called Keeping Families Together, or KFT. They received parental training, support, and encouragement through what are called Family Fun Days. And they received financial help with a simple investment. Orphans Promise bought the family a bigger wok, allowing Fa's grandma to double her business selling pork on the streets. A new roof also ensures she's protected from monsoon rains while she cooks.
For us, that's a great example. We want them to be an example to their community as well, that, hey, you know what it is? It is possible to keep orphans and vulnerable children in a safe, loving, happy family, but perhaps they just need a little bit of a step up, a little bit of support.
At Agape Home, Avis Whiteout is also helping families who want to keep their HIV children.
We are paying for their school fees. We pay for their uniforms, their lunches if they're poor.
It's a no-brainer for Whiteout, who says all her children would prefer to be with family.
If you had to ask every one of my kids today, where would they rather be? In the village with a relative or with somebody out of here as a foster child off the grounds or here, they would choose to be in the Thai culture.
It's also less costly to support these families than to put children in orphanages. And advocates of family-based care believe these kids will grow up much more secure and with a better chance of finding their way in life as adults. Reporting in Chiang Mai, Thailand, Heather Sells, CBN News.
Up next, the puzzling way one woman is celebrating her 100th birthday. Finally tonight, newspaper crossword puzzles challenge folks across the country every week.
And now one of their creators is using a special birthday to conquer a challenge of her own. This week, Bernice Gordon is celebrating both turning 100 years old and becoming the first centenarian to have a crossword puzzle published in the New York Times. Gordon began creating puzzles in her 30s, but her first submissions weren't much of a success, and her mother did not think they were a good idea.
And she said, "My child, if you would spend as much money and time with cookbooks instead of crossword puzzles, your family would be happier and better off."
Boy, she looks great, but Gordon pressed on and her perseverance paid off. The Times printed her first puzzle in the early 1950s, and more than half a century later, Gordon still builds one every morning. Wow.
She's a smart cookie
She
and an
is.
inspiration to all of us. If you don't use
That's
it, you'll
right.
lose it.
That's right. She's exercising her mind. She's putting wrinkles in her brain, as they say.
That's all the time we have for this edition of NewsWatch.
Remember, you can email us at cbn.com. Have a great weekend.